Welcome to Divine Justice YouTube channel. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not content with what he lost with the greed of the war in Ukraine. In the first 3 stages of the war, the Russian army lost almost everything. While the entire prestige of the Russian army was destroyed, a huge troop shortage arose. Putin, on the other hand, decided to mobilize 300,000 people in order to provide soldiers for the Russian army. However, even these moves by the Russian administration did not work against the pressure of the Ukrainian armed forces. In the past, there were also 2 different military forces that the Russian leader trusted. One of them was Kadyrov's Chechen warriors, and the other was the Wagner Group. Chechen fighters have caused great distress to the Russian army since going to Ukraine. Some of the first Chechen battalions to reach Ukraine joined the ranks of Ukraine. The rest had clashes with Russian soldiers, shattering the already broken order of the Russian army. The Wagner mercenary group, Putin's most trusted, suffered serious losses in Ukraine and could not provide the necessary support to the Russian army. After these losses, Putin, who sent even the most notorious prisoners to the front as mercenaries, could not grasp the situation that he brought to the brink of great indignation. But today, the news reflected in the media fell like a bomb on the agenda. A Russian fugitive led to an isolation order in the city after clashing with Russian police. Allegedly, the Russian fugitive is said to have connections with the Wagner Group and to be prepared to be sent to Ukraine. The accuracy of these claims will never be conclusively proven, because the Kremlin and Putin will not want to allow a new popular uprising in Russia by tarnishing the reputation of the Wagner mercenary group in this way. However, when we examine the event, very interesting details emerge. First of all, this event shows us that the social engineering in Russia has completely disintegrated. In yesterday's incident, Russian police asked residents of Novochakhtinsk to stay inside and lock their doors while they searched for a shooter who reportedly opened fire with an automatic firearm. A man who opened fire on police and placed the city in isolation may have deserted the Russian army. The main directorate of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs confirmed that a person attacked police officers with an automatic weapon in Novochakhtinsk, Rostov. Pictures posted on Telegram show the perpetrator covered in camouflage because online chatter identifies him as a fugitive. The attack shook communities just 20 kilometers from the Russian border with Ukraine, and reportedly gunshots were heard in the Novaya Sokolovka district. Authorities are said to have blocked the entrances and exits to the city, while police set up checkpoints and are looking for a man between 178 and 180 meters tall. They told residents to stay inside and lock their doors until the search was complete, and primary schools were closed for a day. The clash caused traffic jams, forcing some cars into the wrong lane. Reports that the man is a deserter have not been confirmed so far, but if they turn out to be true, this will not be the first time. Opponents of mobilization have become increasingly fierce since Vladimir Putin announced his enlistment for the Ukrainian front. In October, defense ministers confirmed that 2 attackers opened fire on soldiers in Belgorod. The area on the Ukrainian border was home to a training facility for soldiers heading to the front. 2 perpetrators opened fire on a group training inside, killing 11 and wounding 15. The defense ministry said the returning fire had killed shooters from a former Soviet republic. In their statement, they described the incident as a terrorist attack. The statement read, "During firearms training with people who expressed their willingness to voluntarily participate in a special military operation against Ukraine, terrorists opened fire on unit personnel with small arms. The conflict came after a fatigued man shot and badly injured a recruiting officer in Irkutsk in September. Experts believe the shootings were due to growing discontent with the Russian draft. We can clearly see that the recent armed attack also reveals the lack of protection in Russian military bases. Whoever the perpetrator is, if someone can come and kill 11 soldiers on a military base, it shows how poorly defended Russian military bases are. Similarly, this event is seen as the last one to happen. This gap, due to the lack of defense and discipline, caused a man to clash with the Russian police in the city, and a very serious decision was taken, such as isolating the residents in their homes. While Russia is experiencing such unpleasant events due to the erroneous mobilization decision made by Vladimir Putin, it seems that it will also be harmful for Putin's energy war decision. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the situation for Russia's energy sector is deplorable. Russia has turned its energy supply into an economic weapon. The strategy is clear in Ukraine, where Russian drones and missiles bombard power plants, but it is also seen in Europe, where Moscow has turned off the gas taps and possibly blew up a gas pipeline. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin's master plan now seems to backfire. In the short term, Putin will indeed do economic damage to the countries of the European Union. This is inevitable, but in the long run, Russia cannot win this energy war. Putin's maneuver will only hasten the collapse of his country's energy sector and the loss of its coveted status as a global energy superpower. Russia's weaponization of energy has three goals. The first, with the gas taps more or less open, was to create uncertainty and prevent EU countries from preparing for what was to come. The second goal was to devastate European economies. And on that front, Russia's strategy is indeed working. The Eurozone will likely record a recession next year. Meanwhile, Putin's third goal was to fuel political divisions in Europe by spreading the idea that the sanctions were causing the energy crisis. This, of course, is a reversal of cause and effect. It was Russia's decision to invade Ukraine that caused the crisis. However, the narrative has received some attention in the EU. In the short term, Europe is in a stalemate. An economic and social crisis is escalating, as high energy prices fuel inflation and a cost of living crisis that could possibly last 2 or 3 years. Also, things could be much worse than they are now. A particularly cold winter will increase energy demand and make congestion worse. In the 2023 and 24 winter season, the situation may become even more dire as European countries manage to refill their gas tanks while Russian gas continues to flow up and down this summer. But they may not be able to do so before next winter. It cannot be denied that these are tough times for the EU, but the fact that Putin's strategy is doomed to backfire may offer some consolation. Moscow's blackmail has firmly convinced EU countries that Moscow is not a reliable energy supplier. As a result, Europe is redoubling its efforts to rid itself of its dependence on Russian hydrocarbons, with LNG infrastructure being rapidly built to boost imports from the US, Australia, and Qatar. The first of many new LNG terminals will soon open in Estonia, Latvia, and Finland, with new gas contracts being negotiated to increase supplies, for example from Algeria or Norway. The bloc is also accelerating plans to develop renewable energy sources. Therefore, it seems that in about 3 years, Europe will no longer need Russian oil or gas. This would indicate Putin's destruction, because he played an open card in the war and Europe saw his bluff. For Putin, this bluff will have a very heavy return, because in the latest statements, Europe has set an upper price for Russian oil. However, the Kremlin does not accept this upper price. Europe is clearly showing that it will turn its back on Russian energy unless it's on its own terms. Just 2 months from now, the bloc will stop nearly all imports of Russian oil and will require Russian oil companies to find alternative buyers for Russian crude. This shouldn't be too difficult, as demand from China, India, and some other developing countries is still high, but these countries will not be perfect substitutes for the European market, once Russia's largest buyer of hydrocarbons, because they will now expect massive reductions in the price of Russian crude oil. In addition, the United States may begin to impose secondary sanctions on Russia's oil exports, further restricting Russia's sales. Meanwhile, the Kremlin situation looks even worse when it comes to gas. Russia currently exports its gas through pipelines positioned to serve Europe, and building new pipelines in their place will take time and money, both of which are insufficient. Exporting gas via pipelines also means signing new contracts with willing buyers. And here again, things look tough for Moscow, as China is currently the only country capable of pulling in more Russian gas, but Beijing is in no hurry to comply. This is not a surprise. China's gas demand growth has slowed, and Russia has made it clear that it is not a reliable energy supplier. This is something Chinese leaders will not forget, and they will naturally try to avoid dependence on Russian gas. With his move, Vladimir Putin lost not only Europe, but also his ally, China. There are also harsh reactions against Putin, who has problems in domestic politics and fails in foreign policy. It is a matter of curiosity how long the Russian leader will resist them and continue the war in Ukraine. Thanks for watching us.